The concept of sunnah in the Muwatta of Malik ibn Anas by Mohammed Yusuf Guraya, Mcgill University, 1969. 2. The term Sunnah al-Rasul, the Sunnah of the Prophet, as such does not occur in the Qur'an. It is also difficult to ascertain with certainty that the Prophet himself used it. The term used in the Qur'an is uswatun hasana, model behavior or exemplary conduct of the Prophet. Ittiba al-Rasul, following of the Prophet. Ita'at al-Rasul, obedience to the Prophet, etc. These terms, particularly the first one, uswatun hasana, convey the sense of sunnah discussed in the previous section. But the absence of the term Sunnat al-Rasul as such in the Qur'an, and the importance it gained later in the Islamic jurisprudence, is a notable phenomenon in itself. To ascertain the exact date of the emergence of the term Sunnah of the Prophet in Islamic history is very difficult indeed. Professor Joseph Schatz, writing about its first use, has maintained the question whether the administrative acts of the first two caliphs, Abu Bakr and Umar, should be regarded as binding precedents, arose probably at the time when a successor of Umar had to be appointed. That was around 23 or 644, and the discontent with the policy of the third caliph, Uthman, which led to his assassination in 655. It took the form of a charge that he, in his turn, had diverged from the policy of the predecessors and implicitly from the Qur'an. In this connection, there appeared the concept of Sunnah of the Prophet. According to Dr. Fazlur Rahman, the Sunnah as a conscious concept appeared at a time when differences arose in the legal and religious field. He maintains, the term Sunnah itself was at first probably not formulated as a conscious concept until differences arose over religious issues. The silent living tradition implies that it was not ab initio described in any term, and that this description and formulation came only where different and indeed opposed interpretations were put forward. Then one was led to oppose the concept Sunnah to innovation. The term Sunnah of the Prophet appeared thrice in the Muwatta of Malik ibn Anas, 3 times. The term has also appeared in the Sirah of Ibn Hisham as a statement of the Prophet. In a derivative sense, the term Sunnah has been mentioned in a statement of the first Caliph Abu Bakr, when he made his first inaugural address after the election, in which he spoke of God and the example of his Prophet as deserving obedience and being binding upon him. The term has also been mentioned in a statement attributed to Umar, quoted by Abu Yusuf. The earliest authentic evidence for the use of the term Sunnah of the Prophet is 2 letters, the first addressed by the Khariji leader Abdullah ibn Ibad, who died in 86-705, and the second Hassan al-Basri, who was 21 to 110, which is 642 to 728, and the letter was to the Umayyad Caliph Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who was 26 to 86, 646 to 705. In a purely legal sense, Professor Schatt maintains the term Sunnah of the Prophet, was introduced into the theory of Islamic law, presumably towards the end of the 1st century of the scholars of Iraq. This formulation and description of the term Sunnah of the Prophet and its verbal transmission probably were as late as we noted above, but as non-verbal concept. It was valid and operative from the beginning of Islam. What was formulated and transmitted in a conscious term was only the formal outcome of the inner logic for a process which goes back to the starting point of Islamic history. We shall document this in this thesis shortly. 3a. The actual struggle which the Prophet waged to implement his ideal was radically different in its moral import and spirit from the usage of the Arabs. The pre-Islamic Sunnah of the Arabs was fundamentally based upon the normative usage of their forefathers. With this established rule of the Arabs, the Prophet's mission differed fundamentally but on 2 points. Firstly, the starting point of his mission was his personality instead of that of the Arabs and their forefathers. Secondly, it condemned the very basis of the Arabs' established rule, i.e., the Sunnah based on the tradition of their forefathers, and tried to divert the direction of life towards his mission. The Arabs did their best to establish the fact against the Prophet that whatever had come down to them from their forefathers could be only valid and genuine basis of their Sunnah. In the Qur'an, wherever they challenged the Prophet, they invoked the example of their forefathers. In fact, the Sunnah based on the tradition of their forefathers was the greatest argument they could bring forth to establish their stand. The verse goes, Those who are polytheists say, if Allah pleased, we would have not set up naught with him, nor our forefathers, lest you should say, only our forefathers ascribed partners to God before us, and we were their descendants after them. They said, hast thou come to us that we may serve Allah alone and give up that which our forefathers used to serve? The advent of the Prophet was a disturbing event for the Arabs. Their tradition was established over the centuries that was being violated under their very noses. For them, the right, genuine and valid path was one which had an air of antiquity and was established over generations. The challenging call from the Prophet really upset the Arabs. Against the entirely novel announcement of the Prophet, as mentioned in the Qur'an, follow what Allah has revealed, they say, no, we follow that which we found our forefathers doing. And when it is said to them, come to that which Allah has revealed unto the Messenger, they say, sufficient for us is that wherein we found our forefathers. The Meccans were so sure about the rightness of the way of their forefathers that they were following, that they declared, we found our forefathers on a course, and surely we are guided by their footsteps. The repeated and recurrent reference to Allah by the Prophet forced the Meccans to identify the tradition of their forefathers with Allah. And when they commit an indecency, they say, we found our forefathers doing this, and Allah has enjoined it upon us. The Qur'an criticized the basis of the pre-Islamic tradition and declared that their forefathers were ignorant and without sense. The verse says, even though their forefathers had no sense at all, nor did they follow the right way. What? Even though their forefathers knew nothing and had no guidance? There is a positive condemnation of their forefathers in the Qur'an and the way they followed. They indeed found their fathers astray, so in their footsteps they are hastening on, and most of the ancients surely went astray before them. The Prophet, by summoning the Arabs to accept him and his mission against the long-established tradition of their forefathers, in fact, demolished the principle of reverence for antiquity by diverting the standard of validity and genuineness of everything towards his teaching. Whatever the Messenger gives you, accept it, and whatever he forbids you, abstain therefrom. He challenged the sources of their tradition and its normativeness. They were surprised by this innovation introduced by the Prophet, which created a stir in their old established customs, and they were astonished by this novelty. In their surprise and bewilderment they exclaimed, this is a novel thing. The Arabs were not inclined to approve of the guidance, the way, the sunnah introduced by the Prophet, despite all the rational and logical arguments brought forth in the Qur'an. They angrily and bitterly characterized the way introduced by the Prophet as a forged lie and as a form of sorcery. And when our clear messages are recited to them, they say, this is nothing but a man who desires to turn you away from that which your forefathers used to worship. And they say, this is nothing but a forged lie. And those who disbelieve say of the truth when it comes to them, this is clear sorcery. The Arabs incessantly invoked the element of antiquity and rejected whatever was new and was not found in their former times, and declared it a forgery. We never heard of this in the former faith, this is nothing but a forgery. As the Prophet himself was the innovator of this new sunnah, therefore he was also not spared. Where the Meccans condemned his message as forgery, the Prophet was called a liar and an enchanter. And they wonder that a warner from among themselves has come to them, and their disbelievers say, this is an enchanter, a liar. Stay tuned for many more parts.